catalyst of the divine edited. In the north, the will of man defied the earth through the sprawling network of structures. That was the capital. Within this labyrinth, the spiraling Gothic architecture gazed upon the ugliness of their souls from its throne of beauty as the people scurried about, hunched over so as to hide their hearts from it. The long lifespan of the empire had estranged them from its purpose. Thus the town wept. You who once made me in your image through your aspirational essence, what has become of you? And to the west of the city, a castle built into the base of the mountain was a bastion, the last whisper of nobility. Within that castle there was a chamber, and in that chamber sat King Syphus. The chamber was lit with a myriad of colours, each contrasting against the marble floor. On that floor before the king, who slumped on his throne with the most lackadaisical of dispositions, stood an arbiter, draped in robes decorated with golden accents. I've allotted this time to the clergy and by extension to you, to voice grievances. You may speak, the king said, waving his hand dismissively. My king, or rather our king, we come with a proposition, one on which the longevity of our nation hinges. In the deepest study of our highest members, we have discovered a blight within the human mind, nestled so deeply it may even be considered primordial in nature. Go on, spoke the king, a proclivity toward decadence and hedonism with the surge in population. And what do you propose to solve this? The king asked, deep in contemplation. There is no solution, my king. This is predestined, based on the gods' blueprint. The people have grown fat and comfortable due to your noble rule. They no longer see a need for authority or a king. They've become used to order, to structure. The king interrupted. They have become blind to the role it plays in their lives. And so, the earth must rest, the soil must, the cycle of life must continue. Through our deaths, the king finished. A deep melancholy possessed the king. I've done everything in my power for the longevity of this empire. I conquered all their gods and made them bow before ours. But even in conquering their gods, I suppose we have to face ourselves in the end, don't we? Slouching further in his chair, the despair weighed heavily on him, almost as harsh as the crown he bore. I'm sorry, my king. I'm afraid your reign will be the last. But that's not to say you can't. Make the fire burn bright, even for just a little bit longer. The king glanced at his son, Julius Aurelius Marcellus, and lastly, his daughter, Clementine. When will I know this empire's days are numbered? The king asked. When the people cry for freedom, the arbiter said. From the gods they feel confined, but don't understand that they need to protect themselves from each other. But this rebellion can never be satiated. The desire for liberation will never end. One day they will cry to be freed from even life itself, freed from the pain and suffering it entails, and then all will be lost to time. The human soul, in its desire to be liberated and freed, will stagnate and trap itself in vice. The human soul, in its desire to be liberated and freed, will stagnate and trap itself in vice. Even as these words echoed through the king's chamber, their truth was already manifesting across the river, where the seeds of chaos had begun to sprout. Denizens moped about with the most wretched of complexions, abetted by the squalid stone, streets, but within their malformed hearts, a spark of rebellion began to fester. A man by the name of Christopheles was beginning to garner the ears of the people. There he stood next to a figure draped in cloth. Is the heart of the people not representative of the ruler's deficits? The maguses of the sanctum of the twilight teach us that we should not love. To love is to suffer, but they fail to realize that this suffering is the very source of love, as one cannot exist without the other. Yeah, the crowd shouted in unison. What about us? damn their god. Christopheles unveiled the figure in the cloth, revealing a magus. He pulled out a blunderbuss and pointed it at her head. Where is your god now? Go on, pray, he sneered, ripping the gag off the woman. She turned to him, her gaze as calm as the eye of a storm. The retribution for your actions has already begun. You suffer from them at this very moment. Yeah, I figured. Go on, tell the crowd what you mean, he demanded. She replied, her voice steady. Your struggles are derivative of your deficits, Christopheles. A murderer suffers from never knowing compassion. A prostitute suffers from never knowing love. An architect will never know the gift of natural order, and a gardener will never realize his will to power. Christopheles, realizing what the woman was implying, felt the gun begin to shake in his hands as his palms grew sweaty. Damn you! Damn you! The blunderbuss went off, and the magus went limp as her head thunked against the concrete in the town square. With that action, the monument of divine order began to crumble as violence spread through the capital streets above, beneath them, in the network of caverns that honeycombed the city's foundations. Another piece of this unfolding tragedy waited in. Darkness. In a dank, decrepit cell with mildew lining the corners and rats scurrying. About, a prisoner slouched against the corner of her cell. She was broken, betrayed, and anemic. The light slowly inched toward her chamber. She waited with anticipation. So pungent it choked her. The footsteps echoed within the desolate expanse of her mind, so deprived of stimulation. The prisoner thought to herself, had they finally come to execute me? The footsteps grew louder, and the doors screeched open. A man stood there, his posture radiating sternness. Clotho Borales, your audience is demanded by the king. Clotho squinted, trying to inquire why, but she couldn't. Her throat was as coarse as sandpaper. The man looked down at Clotho. He raised his hood as her eyes adjusted to the light. What has become of you, Clotho? A tear came down the man's face, and he carried Clotho out of the cellar. He gave her water and put her on his back, carrying her out of the cellar as she nodded off to sleep. Clotho woke up in a room with ornate curtains and carved gold, with elaborate engravings decorating the edges and corners of every item in the room. She thought to herself, somebody had wanted something from me. Again, she heard footsteps, this time with confidence. She noticed the time between the sounds of the steps and thought, this person seemed to be walking with purpose, a sense of urgency, probably a servant or a high-ranking noble. The door opened, and a high-ranking noble, with a silver-lined cloak and extravagant attire, appeared, with almond-colored hair. The noble looked at Clotho. You served King Raphael, correct? Clotho nodded. It had been brought to my attention by my sources within the court that there was a conspiracy against the crown by the clergy. This had weighed on my mind heavily because I knew what this empire, built upon the back of your deeds, had done to you. And yet I dared ask this of you, if you would obligate yourself to the crown, no, the people once more, I would give you my vessel. I was but a bastard and had no achievements to my name, nor strength or intelligence like my brothers. Clotho mustered a whisper. Yet it seemed your soul had no less vitality, no less essence. I would not take your vessel, child. It was the Great Mother's gift to you, and not yours to give. Clotho smiled warmly. My child, you needed not graft my soul to your body to bestow my divine spark upon you. The prince smiled pleasantly. Good answer. It was never necessary to begin with, the prince remarked. There was a procedure that grafted a person's soul to a homunculus. You would have been freeing yourself and damning yourself to a seemingly eternal existence on the earthly plane. You would have never seen the weight of your deeds, not because you would not have been a witness, but because you would have been detached from the mother and given yourself to the father. You would have returned to her when you found your heart once more. An uncharacteristic, serious tone possessed the prince. Alternatively, I would have allowed you to live out your days in peace in this very castle, but know that you damned us all. Clotho finally mustered up the strength to speak, despite her decrepit state. I would aid you, she stated, her resolve set. Below, the dank laboratory was dimly lit with exotic creatures in vats and limbs hanging from chains in the ceiling, and the wailing of starved, malformed beasts in cages. A Magus meticulously gathered the items needed for the procedure, and an emaciated old woman lay on the operating table among it all. The prince stood outside, impatient. The Magus gave Clotho a look of reassurance. Lady Clotho, this operation consists of me chanting to achieve resonance within my mind, body, and heart, to call upon Yargulash, the lesser great one of death, to graft your soul to this vessel. The consequences entail stillness within the mind and heart for movement within the body. You are robbed of your divine spark for lives to come. You know no love, no pain, no joy, no suffering, only lust, only pleasure, only clarity, only logos, only principle. The union of the mother and the father is separated within you. Do you understand what you are sacrificing? The beast in the laboratory continues pleading and wailing. A tear runs down Clotho's face. My humanity for lives to come, for the nations for centuries to pass, I understand that because of this I will not be able to witness the weight of my deeds, but I will experience the weight of them for many lives to come. The Magus looks at Clotho and begins chanting. The light around the Magus begins to bend and contort, and Clotho begins to feel her mind split, her heart break, as her soul is separated from her body and placed into the body of a creature with 4 arms, a tail, wiry legs with hocks, and feet shaped like those of a deer's. However, no fur is present. Briefly, Clotho feels herself die, and then she opens her eyes. Her mind is empty. The fear she had before is there, but it no longer compels her to act, and her rationale is there too, but it no longer stops her. Clotho looks at her hands and recites a verse from the Tabaka. A heart and mind that's not at war with itself is a lifeless one. Movement, be it towards order or decay, feeds the cycle of life. However, stagnation destroys it.